Hello everyone, good evening. Thanks the Elevation team for the invitation. Glad to talk to all of you. It's a real privilege to follow Sriram after he's built the foundations of the foundation modules. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Cool. I hope I'm audible. What I'll do today is I'll talk about some of our experiences tinkering with generative AI at Meesho. This, no points for guessing, but this image is also generated by a stable diffusion model. I just thought that we are in this stage where we are trying to figure out the building blocks and seeing what good things and what towers can we create. Very much at a very formative stage, but nevertheless, we will share some of the examples of what are the possibilities that we see as of today, and hopefully learn from you a little bit about your experiences during the Q&A. Okay, so of course we are all overwhelmed with the progress that generative AI, overall AI has made in the last year or so, and I know there are a lot of investors in the room. They would love this space because they love exponential curves. And today, I mean, if I look back, everything in AI is exponential, right? If I look back, like in my career of 15 years or so, there's never been a period where achieving state of the art has the rate of breaking SOTA records has been so thin, right? So just about, if you track the rate of achieving SOTA, that has come down from years to months to now weeks, and I'm always tense today to talk about any sort of SOTA technique because I might have a risk of sounding very yesterday, and today morning something came up which is very new. In terms of parameters, of course, it's again following an exponential trajectory from hundreds of millions to billions and now trillions of parameters. But the most exciting thing, which I think is making all of this possible, is the exponential growth in the sheer number of people who are today tinkering with AI and trying to build systems with AI, right? And this, if I look back, at least in the Indian context, even maybe 10 years back, there were hundreds of people who would use something called AI or machine learning and as part of their work life. Maybe around 2015, it became thousands, and now it's like in India, it would be what, hundreds of thousands, definitely, worldwide, definitely millions of people who are at least trying to use OpenAI or any other large foundational model to make to build something or to get productive benefit in their work lives. Right, so just back to Meesho again, like if I look at the e-commerce marketplace, every pillar at an e-commerce marketplace has the potential to be disrupted through some of the other application of generative AI. There are a lot of applications in the cataloging space which have come up, and I'll show a few examples of this today. How you work with sellers, how you help sellers grow on the platform, how do you acquire users, how do you market products on the platform or off the platform, the entire shopping experience, be it the discovery funnel, the decision to buy state, all of that is being disrupted. And of course, customer support is very, very easy to understand why that is being disrupted. Also product design, right? So you're getting into the manufacturing things, and even product design can be disrupted by generative AI. And last but not the least, definitely employee productivity. Each function, not just developers, each function, be it a product manager, be it an analyst, every function today has a co-pilot to benefit from, right? So at Meesho, of course, like as we do our planning, in every team we have something or the other, and we are also encouraging everyone to think about how generative AI can disrupt their function. So I'll walk you through a few of the examples, and along the way discuss some of the learnings and that have come through. Right. So before I get started, I'll start off with some of the use cases on the seller front, right? But before I do that, I thought that I'll just present what's a typical seller persona at Meesho, so that it helps you get a sense of what kind of technologies might benefit them. So the seller persona at Meesho is our typical small business owners with less than 5 employees, meager turnover of around 3 lakhs monthly turnover, who are listing products at around 300 rupees, and majority is unbranded products, right? And Meesho's USP is helping them through a radically simplified cataloging process, right? So all that you need is to upload a photo of the product to list that product on the e-commerce marketplace, right? And we also guide them on what's the right price point to become successful, right? And the reason I'm saying this is in both of these, generative AI can play a very, very big role. And I'll start with the cataloging process. And so if you upload a product, in order to list on any e-commerce platform, in order to list a product completely, you would need to fill out a lot of attributes, right? I mean, in case of a shirt, what's, let's say, the pattern of the shirt, what sleeve, what color, and so on and so forth, right? And every e-commerce platform has invested into AI models to make this process of cataloging much more efficient. And over the years, the models have become much more accurate and more scalable to different kinds of attributes, including Meesho, right? I mean, when we just started our journey, we built out over the last 2 years, we built out some of these models to extract taxonomy attributes, right, from any model. And the approach, it's a lot of hard work, right? So for every category of model, you would need to find examples, like figure out how to maintain those models and combine these models, because every category could have hundreds of attributes and potentially thousands of values of these attributes. So you would need to make sure that all of these attributes, you are getting good performance and so on, right? So we spent a lot of time, at least a few data scientists worked on this project for maybe a couple of, at least a year or so to get it to a stage of maturity. And hey, just a couple of months back, you have something called Visual GPT, where any person, I mean, maybe a business user can just plug in a question and you get nearly similar degree of accuracy, right? So that's fascinating. And that's the power of generative AI. So if you give this particular product, and it's a real Meesho product, it comes up with a very, very crisp product description, right? Which has all the important attributes that you possibly would need to have, right? So key learning, of course, is yes, I mean, all of this was possible, but purely in terms of the amount of effort that you put in, not just to create the models, to maintain those models, right? I mean, your taxonomy might change, someone would add a new attribute, you would need to retrain the models, you would need to, so like if you have hundreds of categories, you would need to understand, hey, whether there will be a single model or one model per category. So many design decisions need to be taken. And here you just need to ask a question. It's as simple as that. So why wouldn't you think of consolidating and running one model? And not just that, I mean, this model not just does visual attribute detection, but it can do any kind of cataloging task, right? So here's another very, very important cataloging task, where as a catalog gets listed, you want to ensure that your product is complying to a lot of compliance guidelines, right? And we would ban certain kinds of products like guns, alcohol, and so on. We would want to detect whether there's a brand infringement, right? Any kinds of obscenity, and so on and so forth. And there's a wide range of tasks, right? And what our team did over the last, a couple of years is for each of these tasks, they followed a painful process of assembling training data and create a very custom model to get an accuracy, right? And here the same model, the visual GPT, or there are other cousins of the model family, some multi-modal LLM can just through visual question answering, you can answer all of these, right? And in some cases, it processes text information, and even the text models, if you take pains to train a very good text classifier, an LLM will surely beat it, right? Okay. So so here's another example in the same cataloging space, and this is fairly unique to Meesho. As you looked at the seller persona, they do not upload, so they cannot afford very expensive professional model shoots, right? So what they would do is they would just click a photo, they lay out the product on the table, click a photo and upload it, right? And turns out such photographs will probably not give you very good click-through rates as you list them on your listing pages. And if you have a better shot photograph, which is more professionally shot, it would get you better performance. And what we were trying to do is, there's another class of models called virtual try-ons, where the idea being that there's your photograph and there's a photograph of a product, and if you virtual try-on model will help you figure out, generate an image, how that particular piece of product would look on you, right? So if you just extend that, you can use the same kind of models for actual cataloging, right? You can create a well-shot image, like for a model, you can sort of take every photograph, put it on the model, and generate a model shot image, right? And this is something that I think even the previous generation of models, GAN-based models, were doing in a two-stage setup. And recently, again, there's this try-on diffusion model which Google released, which upped the state of the art on virtual try-ons by a significant margin. Again, there are challenges here, because many of the models today, including the try-on diffusion, performs well on well-shot images. They do not particularly perform very well on images on the wild which do not adhere to any guidelines. The other challenge is, how do you prevent hallucination here, right? And there's an actual tendency for these models to make up certain details about the product which you would not want to do, because otherwise you'll end up making false promises about the product to customers, right? So how do you solve some of those challenges? But this is again a very interesting use case where we can use try-on models to get nice catalog images, nicely shot, professionally shot images for our products. Right. Moving on to seller growth and experience. So again, a bunch of interesting use cases here. One of the use cases is around doing negotiations, right? So any kind of a platform, whether it's B2C, B2B, needs to procure goods from their suppliers. They need to do a negotiation, right? And many of these negotiation contracts are they sort of follow one contract, which is not negotiated per supplier, right? Just because negotiation is expensive, right? You would need people to negotiate and strike a deal which might be win-win for both the parties. And that is not possible, like typically, depending on the value of the contract that you're trying to sort of set up, you may or may not want to change your terms and conditions for every new person that you want to negotiate with, right? And today, the ChatGPT or like LLMs in general are making negotiation possible. So here's one example. I was just using ChatGPT. So we were trying to create, like a lot of the language you see is here in English, right? And what we are trying to do is we are trying to convince a supplier to say that, hey, why don't you list a product at a cheaper price, right? And if you give this goal to the LLM, they would negotiate with the supplier to say that, hey, your competition is listing similar product at this cheap price, why don't you drop your prices, right? And for every counter that the supplier, in this case the user, would do, you would come up with a counter, right? And how do you build such models which can help you negotiate at massive scale, right? So in Meesho's context, we employ a lot of key account managers, which is really feet on ground to maintain relationships with your suppliers, right? But there's only a limit to doing that because you can't afford to have millions of key account managers, so you would want to restrict to some of the larger suppliers. But now you can do this at massive scale, right? And there, of course, other kinds of use cases around seller education, seller support, which are better understood. So I'll skip it. Okay, I'll move on to the user side of problems, and before I do that, a little bit of sneak peek on who is the Meesho user. Most of our users come from tier 2 plus, tier 2, 3, 4 towns and cities. A very good fraction of them are first-time internet users. They are not very technologically savvy. A lot of them prefer the feed UX. They can't even do keyword search very well. So, and of course, they come to Meesho for low prices and large selection. So I'll start with the user growth and marketing side of things. And in-app marketing, a lot of in-app, this thing organically, we use push notifications to drive traffic into the app. And as many of you who get frustrated receiving such push notifications, there's a fatigue which sets in because they follow the same template, very, very repetitive and so on. And that need not be the case anymore, right? So here's a interesting example. Let's say there's a cup that you want to sell and you want to generate a push notification, right? You can create an image with a stable diffusion model, nice images. In this case, we created a teddy holding a cup, and I asked, how do you create a funny marketing one-liner in 50 characters, right? And include something about a teddy, and it did that, right? Which you can now use this creative, use this one-liner, and create push notifications, right? And it can even write it in Hindi for our audience, and it does it very well, right? The other kinds of use cases on the marketing side is now it really sort of, and this is really disruptive, it allows you to do one like individual product level marketing, right? So what is the bottleneck or rate limiting step in scaling your marketing efforts. It's actually creating creatives, right? Generating high quality creatives which you can post on social media and so on, and you need to employ a creative team. You're pretty much constrained by their the number of people that you have on that team, right? And here you can create all of these creative materials and do much better. Actually, you can you don't need to just have images. You can create short videos. So you give a product, it creates a slideshow with a short video. It can even compose music, which goes well with the product. So you're having a lot of fun composing music. So we'll give a lipstick as a product, and we'll ask to compose a 30-second music, and the music that gets generated for a lipstick versus like an earphone is very, very different, right? And for an electronics thing, it will be a little bit of a techno music. For something else, it will be different. So yeah, so you can create per product. You can potentially create a marketing video which you can launch on social media to get traffic into your app. Right? So marketing is fundamentally getting disrupted, and I'm sure Elevation has already looked at a lot of marketing companies and invested there. Next, product discovery. Again, if you look at I spoke about our user persona. The Bharat user, it's a very well-known fact that they find it hard to work with widgets and filters, which is a very core part of e-commerce shopping experience. It's built on search, and then you apply filters. There are these merchandising widgets that people create, and Bharat users do not work very well with some of those elements. And this, I think, Prabhakar Raghavan talked about Google search a few days back, that the adoption of voice search in India is like 10x compared to anywhere else in the world, and we see that at Meesho as well, right? Our adoption of voice queries is almost 30%, which is much bigger than one would expect, and so people are much more comfortable with conversational interfaces and voice-first interfaces. Even if you look at our keyword searches, many of the keyword searches is ये कुत्ती दिखा दीजिए इस कलर का. So that's actually a sentence. It's not keywords. So how do you detect intent out of a lot of these problems? And query understanding has been a long-running thread, as you can imagine, in any e-commerce platform. And how do you get a deep enough understanding of queries which are written in all of these Indian languages with a variety of misspellings and so on? And out of the box, again, GPT does a very good job at correcting spellings and translation and detecting attributes from the queries, right? And on the conversational side, again, building conversational commerce is something that we are definitely looking at in a very big way. One of the big parts in conversational commerce is also to get the UX right? It's less about the technology. How do you blend your the results that you give with the feed UX? You don't want the chat-based UI to come in the way of the user's browsing feed. So it's as much a technology, like a algorithmic problem, as it is a design problem. So we're working on some of those areas. On recommendations, so complementary product recommendations is one particular class of recommendations which has been one of the difficult ones, I would say. The reason it's difficult is many times the data that you get internally to the platform, people do not buy complementary products in the same session or in the same week and so on. Definitely not the users in India, right? They don't purchase it that way. So it's hard to create signals to figure out that, hey, this, and especially when it comes to fashion, right? when this particular garment top wear will go with this bottom wear. So it understands, like it needs an understanding of fashion and color and its aesthetics and so on. And some of those patterns are not readily available in your user interaction data. And again, out of the box, because an LLM is trained on the world's knowledge and including fashion knowledge, it can do a very good job. I mean, the same image, if you just ask with a simple prompt for the GPT model to imagine that you're a fashion stylist and give you some recommendations, it does a very good job. And it actually can also give you rationale, right? It will tell you that, hey, a black high-waisted skinny jeans for someone like me who does not understand why this would be recommended, it'll tell you that the black color complements this argyle pattern. I don't know what that means, but it'll tell you, and then there's something about crop length also. So it's very detailed. It's not random, and so it's very detailed, and someone who has a good fashion sense would probably be able to critique this, but I can't. Okay. So on to product comprehension. So one of the big challenges in Meesho, it's a marketplace of unbranded products, right? Is naturally building trust on products is very difficult, right? So unlike when you're selling branded products, the trust on the brand is already built up. When you're selling unbranded goods, people would want to learn a lot from the reviews and ratings and what other people have said before arriving at a purchase decision. So this is a problem which is very important for us, but at the same time it's hard. I mean, like review summarization and aspect detection and reviews, again, has been like over the past decade, a large body of work has happened. And it's fascinating to see, again, out of the box, zero shot, the kind of results that you see. When you ask it to summarize hundreds of reviews, it gives you a very crisp summary. It does a very accurate clustering, detection of aspects, clustering all the reviews under those aspects. Very, very fascinating, right? Okay. So before I end, I'll end with a few comments and then get into questions and answers. A lot of what the team has been doing currently across all of these use cases is still figuring out how to scale them, right? And different use cases are at different levels of maturity, and where they will, some of them are nearing production usage, some of them still very exploratory. But across all of them, I think the kind of activity which is going on is how do you sort of find this sweet spot between accuracy and cost by trading off on aspect of the model sizes or the context window, right? And like the tool that you have is prompt engineering and a few other tools. So initially you will start off with prompt engineering, which is quite sad. It's a lot of hit and trial and a lot of hard work. But then once you iterate it on and get the best trade-off, you'll probably look at some of the parameter efficient from prompt fine-tuning methods, or look at smaller models. And again, as Sriram was telling, some of the trade-offs are not nice. You often see drastic sort of fall in accuracy, and you would need to take some of those trade-off calls. If you hit limits on context windows, again, you can try summarizing conversations and or the retrieval augmented generation framework that Sriram explained. Some of this will come in handy in cases. And finally, like, you'll figure out strategies on how do you launch and get some feedback with some business context. You would say that, hey, okay, the value that you generate is tremendous. At least let's do a limited launch. Let's do it in an async manner for a subset of the context or subset of queries where the return on investment is high. And that's the kind of nature of conversations, the nature of work which is going in scaling a lot of these use cases. And largely these are zero or few shot kind of setups. And the way forward is, of course, you would want to mature to building more assets, which will sort of build some moat for you in the long term, and can give you that edge in some of the use cases which matters to your company the most, right? And if you think about, like, again, it needs to be something where there needs to be a very strong data loop, where you can build out a product which can be serving as a moat for you. And if you think of in the e-commerce context, what could be that data? Like, one way to think about it is e-commerce has a language of itself, right? Shopping has a language of itself, and you can draw parallels with social media. So every platform where you have users interacting, there is a language of expression of users, right? Users on e-commerce app will express with clicks, add to carts, and orders, and all of that on products which are items and so on. So how do you build a language model for this new language that is custom to you, right, or your platform? And how do you do that effectively? So definitely you would need to model these sequences of user interactions on products. And how do you start doing that, and what's the expectation? What you want such models to do is develop a very deep understanding of what the product is, what the product representations that you would build are really compelling, which could be like giving you a lot of information across a wide range of tasks. It would need to have a very strong understanding of which products are browsed or ordered in what context, right? So you would want this language model to do a much better job at doing this compared to a zero-shot application of a GPT-4 or a PaLM or some available LLM, right? And here, again, there are different ways to think about it, but again, a lot of recent research has been talking about building LLMs for recommendations, which is a good field if some of you are interested to follow. There's some work happening here and across companies. Google has this Rec LLM, and there's some work happening out of Tencent, etc. But the key idea I'll capture in a very few words is that you are, for every different kind of user interaction, you would build out. So just stepping back a little bit. So the one way to think about it is you have a language of your own, and you can build a LLM from scratch, right, on that model, which has a different vocabulary, which is only having, let's say, product IDs or certain terms which are specific to your domain. And one of the learnings has been that, like, transfer learning or building on top of a large language model is always better, right? And I think that is coming in even when you have a vocabulary of your own. One of the unsolved problems, by the way, is that when your vocabulary size is at least as large as the vocabulary size of the English language or other languages on which these LLMs are trained, how will these models work, and what are the different strategies to counter that challenge? But many of those are work in progress. But one thing which is getting clearer is there is definitely merit in taking an LLM and like tuning it on your language, right? And how do you build out the sentences for your language is where all the magic sauce is, right? How do you make it explainable? So a lot of the magic which has happened, if you look at the instruction fine-tuning work and so on, is people have been able to build up an understanding of complex concepts by breaking down those complex concepts in terms of simple concepts, right? So just like human beings, you sort of, when you study from class 1st standard to 12th standard, you follow a certain trajectory, right? From going from simple to complex, right? Like if you want to do algebra, you would first need to do basic arithmetic or numbers. And because your algebra is sort of, algebraic knowledge is built on top of this. So similar way, when you're thinking about training machines, right, even for your own language, there's a lot of things that you can borrow and draw from the common things which an LLM has already taught it. And you would want to leverage that. And actually, there is merit in leveraging that, because the efficacy when on a complex task or even on a custom task will be much better if you can borrow from this learning that an LLM already has, right? So yeah, I mean, this is a good area of research, and we're trying to figure out what this means for a domain-specific LLM, and definitely an area which will evolve, and a fascinating area to look forward to in the next few months and years. Okay, thank you. I'll pause now and.
The ML only data side of that issue.
You're really putting me on spot. Yeah, so I think, like democratization of any technology only strengthens that technology, right? There's always better work. If you have 50 people today, I'm very confident that they would do better work if some of the work that they're doing today is being offloaded to other people, right? So yeah, I mean, finding data science talent or machine learning talent in India and building out a good team is very, very hard. So nothing could be much more liberating if you can get them to focus on some of the harder problems and offload some of the work which could be offloaded to others. So
yeah, I think my question was more towards the kind of people. So for example, if I
Yeah.
borrow that analogy of moving from an on-prem to a cloud kind of setup.
Sure.
So the kind of engineers the company would have employed, right, to maintain an on-prem setup versus a cloud setup for the infra division would be different. So from a data or an ML science team, how do you see the job descriptions or titles broadly changing in terms of the kind of people being employed?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in terms of like, so one of the things which has happened, and which is the revelation, the thing that I mentioned in people, the entire engineering org today, and we are doing this hackathon, I'm sure most companies are doing GenAI hackathon these days, right? And the participation in those hackathons is like everyone participates, right? So everyone today is an ML engineer, like building some systems using ML, right? Now, of course, that helps you generate many more ML products, but there will always be problems which will require a foundation knowledge of machine learning, where you'll always hit into bottlenecks where you would need to go into the basics, which will need a machine learning knowledge, for which some of the existing people who have a foundational knowledge of machine learning, statistics, deep learning would come in handy. It's just that some of the problems that they might have been working on would be offloaded to others, but there are always new problems opening up.
Hello. So you briefly mentioned about hallucinations, and the earlier models that you were building, or even with GPT, hallucinations has been a common problem, although they are reducing. So with a product like Meesho, there must be severe business implications of those hallucinations. So can you share like one small example where you could solve this problem and this did not result in any business repercussion?
Yeah, so again, the way to counter hallucination is very context and use case specific, right? Where it can cause damage is where you have a end user facing conversational experience, right? And there you need to be more careful, right, to bound the conversation. And as Sriram was mentioning, I mean, like things are getting better even with these meta prompts around, hey, you do not like you restrict to these kinds of areas and so on. the LLMs are getting better. I mean, you don't sort of put in any random comment, right? So there are ways to sort of put in guardrails there. For some of the other use cases, hallucination is just another kind of error, right? Where you're not interacting with the user, it's some backend, let's say, some whatever, visual attribute extraction, some of those things. That is yet another kind of an error, right? It does not have any other harmful implication. So there you would tend to sort of look at it in your sort of whatever evaluation data set you have and take it as yet another kind of error. You're not particularly bothered by it.
Good.
I bother.
So one of the, like in e-commerce as well, a large part of ML has also been with structured data, numeric data and pattern recognition. The true products come out when there is a marriage of what you understand about language and these patterns of numeric data. What's your experience of marrying the two, or what do you foresee in that space?
Numeric data is in some
Like transactions and demand patterns, all of those, right? Mostly numeric.
Yeah, and that was a little bit on that last slide, right? I mean, it's the exact dynamics of what solution would work, exactly what is the training regime, is still sort of work in progress. But definitely, I think, like training on user interaction data, figuring out how do you sort of think of in like converting those user interactions and transactions, phrasing them as examples, right, is where a lot of the magic sauce is, right? And like a lot of times, in which has been proven in FLAN and some of these papers, right? The same thing, like as data scientists, the most obvious thing to do is, hey, there's a new task, you just add it as task number 21, right? This is a new kind of transaction, some identified, right? And the biggest learning in the past few months has been that, hey, you don't put it as yet another identifier. You try to spell out what it means in English language, right? And how do you craft any of these kinds of data? How do you craft that into English language so that it gets broken down into certain concepts which helps the training of the LLM, is where a lot of the magic is, right? And like, of course, you need to iteratively figure that out. How do you create these examples and so on? But a lot of interesting work is yet to come on that front.